It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, Brian. So we've talked about the 20s. We've talked about the 30s. Well, then there's this sort of magical thing that happens, this next stage, the age of the 40s, the decade of the 40s. And you just called it Make It Happen is what you titled this.
Yeah, I mean, you really do. It's one of those things where I'm hoping, because we talk about mindset, and there's so much here. I think I've shared with you guys quite a number of times. When I got in my 40s, I got very sentimental about, previous bosses, past relationships, people that were in your life, and you start thinking about how things happen, why they happen, what brings you happiness. All these things go into, I would encourage you, please work on knowing what is your why.
And I think the better you know that, the more clearly you can define that, the less likely you're going to be that person in the 40s that keeps moving the goalposts. They keep saying, oh, well, if I could just make this career achievement, then I'll be happy. Or if I could just hit this income, I'll be happy. If I could just save this number, I'll be happy. I think what you'll find is that all of those goals are really pretty empty.
Well, I think a lot of, I'm going to say Americans, but I think it's people in general, they just don't know why they want what they want, and they don't know what makes them happy and content. So it's not uncommon that, the typical age for buying a house is 33. You get into your 40s, your kids are getting a little older, and you look around and go, hey, they're building a new neighborhood down the street. It's a bigger house. I can afford a bigger house.
So why
not?
Yeah.
And that's the part about moving goalposts, is that if you're not actually doing an exercise of knowing where you're going to, what you need, and what makes you happy, I find that you'll be drifting on your goal seeking. And that's just because you can, doesn't mean you should. And then look, that's not an indictment on people who live in nice houses, drive nice cars, but it is something that I want you to at least do the homework or do the exercises to make sure you're doing it for the appropriate purposes.
The other thing I think from a mindset perspective that I see happen to folks in their 40s, and I don't know why this is the stage that it happens, is they start trying to outsmart themselves. They start thinking, oh, well, now I've got to figure out something different. I've got to do something different. I've got to connect with that thing that I didn't know was going on in the 30s, or thing that I wasn't aware of in the 20s. And I often wonder, Brian, the folks who I see fall into this trap, perhaps they didn't make the best decisions in their 20s, or perhaps they squandered some opportunity in their 30s. And so now they're looking for something in their 40s as a mechanism to try to make up for lost time or make up for past failures or whatever the thing may be.
Well, some people are doing it to make up. Others are doing it because they think that now they've made it through to the next level. And so you see people constantly, index funds is what they made their first 7 figures with, but they think, well,
now I got to do something.
Index funds, that's boring. Anybody can go buy an index fund. They're like, I need to go buy that sexy sizzle investment that, has an accredited investor requirement or some minimum where you have to sign over a document that says, yeah, I know there's a very good chance what I'm buying here is going to zero. I don't know why people feel like they have to do rich people stuff when more than likely they would do so much better if they just stuck with the plot. Don't lose the plot by getting sold a bad private deal or trying to do something you don't understand. There's all kind of distractions, and there's plenty of people that will sell it to you because there's an entire industry that pushes, hey, they're sophisticated. They've got the things that rich people do, and it's figured out, and you too can be a part of this. Just know what actually creates your success.
All right, so let's talk about now in your 40s, how do you get your money right? Well, in our 20s, in our 30s, we talk about your savings rate. You should save this much. You should save this much. You should save this much. I'm going to put a flag in the sand right now that at age 40, you ought to have a number. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but you ought to have some number that you're shooting for. You should have done some sort of spot check and say, well, by the time I retire, I probably need about this much. And when you know your number, you can then assess, am I on the right track or am I off the right track? Do I need to go into hyper savings mode, or can I take my foot off of the gas pedal? If you've not done that spot check, if you've not thought through the exercise of what is my number, you're kind of like a rudderless ship. How will you know if you're on track or off track unless you know what the actual destination is.
I also think this is one of those unique times where we have pushed, we've talked, we've given praise to index target retirement funds, but there will be a critical mass point to where you need more.
Sure.
You're going to need to break out your asset allocation by different account types for tax purposes. You're going to have charitable goals. You're going to be able to want to put things in different places because they just do better there for the goal that they're earmarked for. There is going to be a time, I think, where you'll want to consider taking your relationship to the next level because of what you've created. The success needs a little more attention and collaboration.
Now, we love the idea of you taking it to the next level, and we think that it often does make sense to hire a professional, but in true money guy fashion, we love loading you guys up. And you said something, Brian, about how you can graduate past target retirement index funds. Well, one of the reasons that people often graduate past those is because now, instead of just focusing on asset allocation, how you spread out your assets, you can focus on asset location, where you actually hold your assets. And that means, like, in your tax deferred accounts, you want to hold investments that generate ordinary income because it's tax deferred. You won't have to pay tax as they grow. Inside of your Roths or your tax-free accounts, you want to hold your high-flying growth assets, your things that you know are going to have a lot of capital appreciation potential, so you can maximize that tax-free savings. And then inside of your after-tax bucket or your bridge account bucket or your intermediate term bucket, you want to have assets with more favorable tax treatment. Target retirement index funds don't necessarily allow you that flexibility, but when you do graduate to the critical portfolio mass that this can affect your financial plan, a professional might be able to lean in and help you figure out how do you implement this inside of your strategy.
So I know when we talk about the financial order of operations, step number 7 is hyperaccumulation. Yep. This is really where I think the 3-bucket strategy definitely comes into play, because you have enough money coming in that you're not only filling up like the Roth IRAs, you're not only maximizing your traditional retirement accounts, but now you have to you have enough capacity and margin that you can also save in that after-tax bucket. It makes sense to definitely think about this guide to asset location. And I'll go a step further, is that this is also a time to revisit, should you be in your employer plan doing Roth contributions, which are tax-free, or should you be doing traditional, normal pre-tax contributions? Because guess what? You might be in such a higher tax bracket, it makes sense to do that balancing act and that analysis to figure out what's necessary to get you in the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's so awesome. We talk about, for a 40-year-old, $1 can still turn into $7. A little bit of tax planning can go a long way. If you can find a way to save $1 in taxes, that $1 of saved taxes, whether it be through pre-tax or Roth, whether it be through asset location, can be meaningful sums by the time you get to retirement.
Let's talk about minefields. These are things that, look, I kind of resemble this age group, having an 18-year-old in the house, having a 12-year-old. I know that this is you need to teach the children well. We read and we heard when we did the first slide about economic outpatient care. That's where you have adult children that are still taking money. If you don't want to have adult children needing and requiring money after they leave the nest, start working in your 30s and 40s especially to make sure your kids are good with money. I think this could go a long way so you can avoid those missteps in the future. Another
thing I think is interesting that, Brian, I saw with you in your 40s is that your mortality begins to become a consideration. You told me you had a good friend who, and I think this might have been your mid-40s, early 40s, said, hey, look, this is where you got to figure this out. Like, you have a choice to make right now. You're going to move in one direction or the other direction, and you got to understand the decisions you make now are going to affect that from a mortality standpoint. The 40s, if you ignore that, in your 50s, you might find yourself, oh man, what did I do? How did I end up where I am?
Yeah, start exercising. I mean, the basic story is I had a friend of mine who said his 40s is a fork in the road moment. You can decide to start working on your health, your physical health, exercising and doing things to make sure you're in good shape, or you have to watch out because things, you use it or lose it. I mean, and look, we put a quote in here. You know, one of my favorite movies is Shawshank Redemption.
Yep.
And there is, old Red had a saying. He said, you better get busy living or get busy dying.
That's right.
That's not only, in your goals, your dreams, and maximizing your life. I think it also has a lot to do about your physical existence and making sure that you can be the best version of yourself.
All right, so maybe this is your first interaction with the Money Guy show. Maybe this is the first time you're really taking up personal finance and you're somewhere in those 40s and you think, okay, is it too late for me? Has the train passed me by? The answer is no. But you got to work a little bit harder. For a 40-year-old, if you want to be a millionaire, by the time that you get to age 65, you need to be saving about $780 a month towards that goal. If you are a 45-year-old, it would take $1,351 saved per month to get to millionaire status. Now, I want to flip the paradigm a little bit, and let's assume that you are a financial mutant out there. Let's assume that you're someone who has been saving. I want you to get excited, because if you could find a way to save an extra $1,350 a month or an extra $780 a month, depending on your age, that's an extra $1 million that you might have by retirement. From an accumulation standpoint, if you have been doing the right things and you are someone who's been saving in your 20s and 30s, and by age 40, you've accumulated $136,000, you are already on pace, without saving another dollar, on track to have $1 million by 65. That number for a 45-year-old is about $224,000 to have saved in order to become a millionaire by the time you get to 65.
And it ties in nicely. Being that prodigious accumulator of wealth was exactly what you described earlier. If you wanted to have $2 million by 40 or 45, it's just double the numbers. It's $272,000 for the 40-year-old. Yep. For the 45-year-old, it's $448,000. Now, look, I know that's somewhat aspirational. If maybe you're getting, in your mid-30s or even early 40s, sure, and you hear those numbers that are getting close to $500,000. But you have to start somewhere and know the numbers, know what your number is, so you can plan accordingly.